think that was a good conversation. But now that we've got all of the fluff out of the way, I think it's time to talk about Jar Jar Binks. So, Jar Jar Binks, probably the most hated character in the entire Star Wars universe. If not him, then the little version of Anakin. You know what I mean? Like, there was so much vitriol. Yeah. Or even the sand thing. I guess there's a lot of hated stuff about the prequels, but Jar Jar seemed to have been the most enduring, to the point that the actor that played him, Ahmed Best, considered killing himself because of how much people singled this character out and hated on him. And that's just sad. And I always wondered why. Was he that much worse than C-3PO was in the original trilogy? I mean, I don't get where all the hate comes from. From your perspective, I don't even know, dude. How do you feel about the prequels?
I am the biggest prequel defender on the planet.
Interesting.
Do I think they're good? No, I think there's a lot of problems with them. Newsflash, there's a lot of problems with all the Star Wars films.
Correct.
And to me, if you love Ewoks, you have no right to dislike. You have a right to dislike, but you have no right to attack Jar Jar the way it is. The difference is we saw Ewoks when we were kids.
Yeah.
Ewoks are dumb space teddy bears. So we grew up with them and we accepted them. If you talk to younger fans who were kids when they saw the Phantom Menace, they don't hate Jar Jar. They don't care about him. They thought he was kind of cool. It was, for me, blind nostalgia is why people hate the prequels, but also, I mean, there's some problems with prequels, but specifically Jar Jar Binks.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a way that's really why the OT gets so much critical praise and the prequels do not, is because if you're watching it through the lens of a child, you give all that stuff a pass. People like comic relief typically, but then you grow up, you get more cynical, you start to be more critical in your viewing and all this stuff, and you see this character and it doesn't jive with your current sensibilities. But ultimately, Star Wars was made for fucking kids. It is children's entertainment. We've propped it up and given it this thing. And don't get me wrong, I am a Star Wars fan, but I'm not a super enthusiastic Star Wars fan anymore. I'm a little burnt out on it, if I'm being honest. Yeah, I'm going to go see Rise of the Skywalker, but I can barely muster up any enthusiasm because Disney makes me sick. I'm so tired of them. I'm not going to see The Lion King. I'm not giving them my money for any more of these live action fucking retellings of the classic movies that I love. But they have lost. They are creatively bankrupt. They're only putting out surefire hits, and it's tired. It's fucking played out. Star Wars, same deal. Marvel, same fucking deal. It's all the same over and over and over, and it works, and it's going to continue to work, and it's because people are terrible. Like, we just don't even understand. We're just being recycled the same. I mean, I guess we do understand. I guess we like that, to just be force-fed the same shit over and over again. But that's a whole separate conversation. The thing about Jar Jar, to me, is exactly what you said. The Ewoks, you can point to the Ewoks. When C-3PO gets broken into pieces and Chewie's carrying him on his back in like midway through Empire, I believe it is, it's silly. Like, C-3PO's always been a goofy-ass character, and people don't look at him through the same lens. I have to ask, because I think because this blew up on Twitter, there's got to be the racial element to it as well, right? People look at Jar Jar and they think he's a stereotype of the black fool.
I feel like, I don't know, for me, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like if you look at that, I never once looked at that and saw a black fool. I feel like if you look at that and you see it, maybe that says something about the way you view black people, because that never entered my head.
What about the man, I can't even remember what they were, like the kind of frog people
that had the very Asian?
Yeah.
Those, to me, I mean, definitely seemed, because the way they talk was like a almost like an impersonation about an Asian impersonation, you know?
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the little winged guy. I can't believe I can't remember any of these characters' names right now. The little winged guy that is the junk trader, where they find Annie on Tatooine at the beginning. He like flies around. He's
not
the guy.
Bulba, but the other guy.
Yes, correct. That's what I was thinking. Not Saboba. What the fuck's his name? That guy. People have said
Watto.
Yeah. Watto. One of those is right. And he maybe was a bit of a stereotypical character as well. I can see.
What would he be stereotyping though? I never even saw a connection for that.
Arabs.
Oh, I can maybe see that. Like that. See, that never even popped into my head, to be completely honest with you.
Well, and we go back even further to okay.
But
so
if we're gonna say like he's Arabs, couldn't we easily say the Jawas were too?
Sure.
From the original, isn't that just as offensive?
I agree with you. And if you look at Lord of the Rings, if you look at Tolkien's work, it's very clear that the dwarves were kind of they kind of were a stand-in for Jews. And, Tolkien will say that that was not intentional and that people read it after the fact, but there are so many allusions to it, and people didn't look at that as being derogatory because stereotypes in themselves might not be racist. It just might be broad stroke. Like, I think the dwarves were in a way heroes in The Hobbit. I don't think that he was villainizing them. Yeah, they did have a lust for gold. That was like one of their biggest traits, but they were also a race without a home. They were trying to make their way back to wherever Smaug had the Oakenstone, whatever. I sound like I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. I normally do, but I never like. It's our sensibilities that are changing, and it's kind of interesting to go back with our new sensibilities and approach any works of fiction prior to 2015 because so much fucking things have changed. You go and watch the original Hangover movie when Bradley Cooper says, "Paging Dr. Faggot," and it was in the fucking trailers. People like, that was fine 5 years ago. Now it's completely gross and offensive, and I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying our sensibilities have changed so much that it's hard to hold.
You can't hold art from the past or anything from the past to today's standard because it'll all fail.
Do you think that there's going to be a time in the decades, and we've kind of talked about it before, I don't know if it's actually realistic, but that society is going to swing back the other way and that we're going to reject all of this, or do you think that it's going to continue to move in that direction?
No, I think it's already starting to swing. I mean, you look at people in high school now, they're the most conservative generation, more than baby boomers were.
Interesting.
Yeah, they're the most, I mean, they're still liberal, but they're more conservative than baby boomers were at that time. And people get conservative as they grow older. And so they are the most, all my, like not all, but like a good chunk of my like younger friends and younger, like I'm talking like family members that are not like 20 but like 16, they hate all this stuff. They hate it, everything racist stuff. They're so over it. They're so sick of being, because now if you want to be counterculture, being edgy and pushing the limit is not counterculture. Like pushing like more conservative or traditional values is counterculture.
Yeah,
it's modern counterculture.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're going to definitely see a swing. To bring it back to Jar Jar, do you think that's what it was, or do you think it was just people found him kiddie and annoying?
So, so from this article on the Washington Post, the author says there's a simple explanation behind the much deplored Star Wars character's light speed rise to the top of Twitter's list of popular topics Monday morning. An infographic encouraged fans to discover what their life in a galaxy far, far away would look like. Birth months corresponded to each event, the first letter of the Twitter user's name of characters. If you're Gregory, born in February, for example, you were frozen in carbonite by an Ewok. A lot of people's name starts with a J, which mapped them to none other than Jar Jar. So my name, for example, would have come back with Jar Jar, and he's just always been such a point of contention that people love talking about Jar Jar. I mean, here we are talking about him right now, and to your point, I think that it was that he was a bumbling idiot that people didn't like. I don't think it was the caricature of his race that is what bothered people about him. I think specifically it was when he was like working on Annie's pod racer, and he gets his mouth stuck in the electrical current, and he's like, he's a bumbling fool, but that is a very common, popular archetype in fantasy.
It's a very Star Wars archetype, even. You know,
Yes, yes.
well, and I think you brought up a good point. Is we grew up and we went back. I feel like the prequels made there's things that are wrong with it. Don't get me wrong. I think the acting's pretty horrendous at times. I feel like the overuse of CG is pretty bad. I feel like some of that, the actual plot to me is more interesting than the original trilogy. Actual plot, you know, if you took a J.J. Abrams and had him direct the prequels, I think they'd be better than the originals, personally.
I can see where you're coming from. They are much more sophisticated in their plotting. There's much more on Lucas's mind than just this fairy tale, archetypal fantasy. He tried to integrate politics in it, and a lot of people like to complain about the conversations of politics, which, like you, I think I find that shit fascinating. I like to see the way that the economy is working in this galaxy far, far away. It does allow people to draw more correlations between what's happening in the world at that particular time.
And also, a story of someone's fall from grace is always a more interesting story to me.
Sure,
like,
sure.
That's just an interesting plot about them becoming the bad guy, which is what the prequels are about. I feel like, so I feel like the prequels actually, tonally, to me, captured a lot of what the original trilogy did. I feel like where The Force Awakens and why The Force Awakens is so successful, and I've said this numerous times, Force Awakens didn't attempt to match the tone of the original movies. Force Awakens attempted to match the tone we think the original movies are as we've gotten older, the way we look back at them. They really matched a tone of a film that doesn't exist. These dark, gritty Star Wars films that are real serious, those films actually don't exist anywhere on film. They just only exist in people's minds because of we saw them when we were young. And when you see Empire when you're young, that's a dark movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like so I'm one of those people. I don't mind when I'm rewinded that I like kiddie shit. Like, it doesn't bother me. I'm cool. You know, this is a little kids movie. I watch cartoons all the time.
Yeah.
But I feel like as an adult, sometimes people who grew up with this stuff, they watch it and they're like, "Oh, this is dumb and slapsticky and kiddie. Oh, I'm above this." Not really. You like the originals. You know, they're kind of in that same vein to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I kind of see where you're coming from about The Force Awakens. I felt like, it's slavishly beholden to A New Hope in particular, or AKA Star Wars, the original movie. I personally think that The Force Awakens is the best Star Wars movie, but because they had so much resources, I mean, how could it not be? You know, it brought back that operatic tone. It very much is rooted in nostalgia. Like you said, that I think that it tries to have it both ways, and I think it succeeds pretty well in that, where I think The Last Jedi stumbled a little bit to try to have it both ways. And when I say both ways, I mean this more gritty reinterpretation of what Star Wars was originally, while still trying to pander to children. So you've got the very grown up, very mature stuff between Kylo and Rey and Luke, and then you've got this other thing with Canto Bight, that they feel like they're two completely different movies trying to coexist with each other. I love all of the actual Skywalker shit, and really couldn't have cared less about the rebellion side of it, and the spaceship, you know, with the Imperial shit like coming up on their back, and they're gonna run out of fuel. It's the first episode of Battlestar Galactica, for any of you guys that know that shit. It really is, and that's fine. But I guess the reason why I say that is because they are trying to appease the adults who were fans of the OT, while still trying to bring in these new fans. And as a byproduct of that, a lot of the stuff from the prequels has been left behind, which I don't know if that's necessarily fair, because to an entire generation, that was Star Wars to them.
I agree. That was Star Wars, and I think you're 100% right with Last Jedi. One of my things that I know when I was doing movie reviews, I didn't understand the hate for Last Jedi. I didn't like it, to be honest with you, but I didn't hate it. I felt like it was so painfully accurate to the original trilogy, even in the way of the line delivery, like where they're like, "A ship's attacking us, sir, coming up to our side." Like, you watch that, it's weird the way they do it. It's almost off-putting, because it was like trying to go so much for that, while at the same time having a light-hearted tone that matched to me the prequels, which also kind of
Yes.
match the original. I feel like Force Awaken is the outlier, and I would agree is the best Star Wars film, but it's the outlier. That and Empire are actually the outliers of the. If you look at the entire franchise, that and Empire are the outliers.
Yeah, they're the two. And I struggle to really call The Force Awakens a good movie. I think it was very calculated, and they did it really well. They executed it from a technical perspective better than any Star Wars movie had done prior to that. Empire, I think, is actually like a good movie. I think it's really open for debate if any of the other ones are actually good movies. I actually like Rogue One quite a bit as well. I thought Rogue One was pretty fucking good, but Solo I thought was trash personally, you know?
Solo, I loved elements of it, and I hated elements of it. You know, like there were some things about Solo I absolutely loved. I think it's personally way better than The Last Jedi is. But I actually really enjoyed Solo, but there were parts of it that just felt shoehorned in that you're like, why are we, like the whole droid rebellion part, you're like, why is this even in this movie?
Yeah 100%. It was a little weird, and I like her a lot. I didn't know who she was at the time. Phoebe Waller-Bridge.
It's kind of funny too, that thing, her whole thing is about like being free, you know. And she ends up being a slave with her mind put inside the ship for the rest of the franchise.
100%.
Kind of funny to me.
And who knew that was a fucking thing? What? It's got the soul of a robot in it?
They've never addressed that there was like an onboard AI system ever.
No.
And you're like, oh, okay. Like that whole part, if you take that part out of the movie, it's an exponentially better film.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. I agree. It's one of those weird things that we do. We find something to channel our vitriol towards, and then everybody else jumps on board. Like Jacob Lloyd, young Anakin, had a very troubled early adulthood. I don't know what he's up to now. I don't even know if, I think he's still alive, but he definitely had like bad stints with the law and all of this kind of stuff. And it's really weird because we can't separate art from artists sometimes. And when you constantly hit this character so hard over and over, especially if it's the only thing these actors are known for, they're going to take it to heart. And it's just a shame because that dude, he got work out of it. He was a good motion capture performer. He definitely did the physical comedy of cartoons really well. And I think that's what he was supposed to do. Correct. And that's why I feel like to single out performers in a movie that was directed by a person who was completely disinterested in the actor side of it. He could not give a shit about that because he was so hyper-focused on the visual effects, pushing that technology forward, having this more complex story about, the trade and all of that kind of stuff. His focus was not on the actors, and supposedly he wasn't big on doing retakes, and people would ask him for guidance, and he's just like, just do whatever, just say the line,
Yeah, he wanted to write a really cool script and build a world, which I think he was successful in that element.
I agree.
Feel like everywhere else is where those films fall.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting. I agree with what you said that like if it would have had a different director, if George would have just been responsible for the storytelling and they would have actually had somebody who worked well with actors come in, they could have done something really special. As it stands, when the prequels came out, I enjoyed all three of them. I think they going
I
back
the first, but the other two are great.
Okay, and I think of the three, my least favorite is Attack of the Clones. The second one.
A lot of people hate that one. I actually really like it, but I do think the best is definitely
Sith.
Sith, yeah.
Yeah, most definitely. And even that's got silly parts in it. I think the reason why I rejected Clone Wars or Attack of the Clones as much as I did, and obviously I'm not alone in this, a lot of people have talked about it to great length, but when your central romance, the whole motivating factor of the character is so bad, it's hard to get behind it,
Yeah, I agree, because there's some really cool moments like where he's sitting, like cool moments on paper.
Yeah.
Where he's sitting there and he's talking about how, he wants people need to be told what to do. And she's like, and it's coming from a very good place, where I feel like most authoritarians, not most, but a lot of authoritarians sometimes seem well-meaning when they start off, know? And he's like, who's gonna tell him? Well, I'll tell him because I know better than everyone. It's a really cool moment that is so painful to watch.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, there's a scene there that could be one of the most powerful Star Wars scenes, and you just threw it away.
All right, man.
It's no chemistry.
We just now ran over the hour-and-a-half mark, so we're going to wrap it up for this week. But we do appreciate you guys coming by, as always. And, as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts on these topics. Make sure to leave those down in the comments section. We can engage in a constructive conversation, if you want. Or we can go the other way with shit. This depends on what you're about. It's fine. But, yeah, we do appreciate you coming by. I will post links down in the description so that you can check us out everywhere we're available. And, yeah, I guess that's about it for me. Caleb, anything else?
Sebulba is a pretty cool character.
Sebulba, yeah, he was. He was the racer, the badass racer. Yeah.
He also says Bantapuru, which is the best part.
What does that mean? Bantha shit?
Yep.
Nice. All right. And on that note, thank you guys for coming by. Until next time, and on behalf of both of us, be terrible.